Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into a story older than memory, older than language even. A story that unfolds like petals under sunlight and then snaps shut like jaws. It begins in a meadow with a girl picking flowers. It ends underground, but not all at once. You've probably heard it before. A girl, a god, a bargain, a bite of fruit. But tonight, we're not in a rush. Tonight we wander gently, slowly through the underbrush of myth, brushing up against details people forget. And, by the end, you might still be unsure what really happened, but you'll understand why it matters. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from and what time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk. The ground is soft too. Soft, really. Like the earth hasn't quite made up its mind about being solid. Your feet sink a little with every step, and each patch of grass you pass releases a different perfume. Clover, thyme, wild fennel. And there she is. Persephone, not a queen yet, not even really a goddess in the way we use the word now. Just a girl. Well, a divine girl. The daughter of Demeter and Zeus, technically immortal, glowing in that effortless, slightly suspicious way only gods and Instagram filters can manage. She laughs at something, a bee maybe, or a breeze that makes the tall grass shiver. Her basket is half full of violets. Her tunic is wrinkled from sitting in the dirt too long. She doesn't care. She shouldn't have to care. Because up here in the upper world, everything belongs to her. Or more accurately, everything is hers because it's her mother's. And Demeter doesn't share well. You know Demeter, right? Goddess of the harvest grain, growing things, fertility. Also, goddess of control of rain schedules and of the impossible expectations of parenthood. She doesn't hover. She looms. But today she's somewhere else, checking on a wheat field in Crete or micromanaging barley yields in Thessaly. And so Persephone is alone, which is rare and dangerous. Not dangerous in the way Persephone thinks. She's not worried. Why would she be? She is young, she is beautiful. And she has been told explicitly, repeatedly, and annoyingly that she is important. So she picks flowers, not just because they're pretty, but because she likes the way their stems snap between her fingers, likes the hum of bees that ignore her completely, likes the feeling of being useful to no one. You follow her down a slope through a grove of olive trees that are too old to care who walks beneath them. The air is warm, a little too warm. Somewhere nearby, a cricket decides to stop chirping, just like that. And that's when she sees it. One flower, not like the others. A narcissus, but larger, heavier too, white, almost waxy, like it was carved instead of grown. You know this isn't right. Even Persephone seems to hesitate, but only for a second. Then she reaches. The moment her fingers touch the petals, the ground opens. Not like an earthquake, more like an invitation. No roar, no scream, just a sudden parting of the earth, like a mouth saying, "Ah." And from it, a chariot, 2 black horses, a figure cloaked in shadow, a hand that doesn't hesitate. And Persephone is no longer alone. 1 breath ago, she was surrounded by flowers, now by nothing. The meadow shudders, the bees don't return. Above ground, the grass leans in the wrong direction. The narcissus falls rootless, and where the earth split, it closes again, neat, silent, like a secret being kept. And you're still standing in the field, looking at a sky that's now slightly less blue. No one saw, no one stopped it, and the girl who laughed in the sunlight, she is gone. You wait for what you don't know, but the silence after a disappearance is thick. It presses against your ears like deep water. The meadow doesn't speak. The earth says nothing. Even the breeze feels muted, like the world's holding its breath. But not everyone is silent, not for long. Far away, though, not far enough to be safe, Demeter feels something shift. Not hears, not sees, feels. The kind of shift that doesn't announce itself with thunder or visions. More like an absence, so subtle, so personal, that only a mother could sense it. She stops mid-step, halfway through scolding a field of barley that's growing unevenly. She narrows her eyes. The sun is still up, the sky still blue, but she knows something's missing, and that something is Persephone. Now let's pause here, because Demeter isn't just a mom. She's a goddess mother, which means she doesn't react with tears or confusion. She reacts with a vengeful audit of the entire ecosystem. She starts walking, and where she walks, things change. The crops she once coaxed into growing, they stall. The fields she once blessed, they wither. Not immediately, not loudly, just noticeably, like a frown spreading across the landscape. Because Demeter is no longer the goddess of abundance. She is now the goddess of, where the hell is my daughter? And it's not just the plants that notice. Animals go quiet. Winds misbehave. Even the other gods start whispering. Now here's the thing. You might think Zeus, Persephone's father, king of the gods, cloud-sitter, occasional shapeshifter, might intervene. But he doesn't. Why? Well, the answer is somewhere between politics and apathetic patriarchy. Because Zeus knows what happened. He's the one who allowed it. Hades, god of the underworld, ruler of shadows, proud owner of the creepiest real estate in Greek mythology, had asked for Persephone's hand. Not her permission, her hand. And Zeus, in his infinite fatherly wisdom, said, "Sure, bro, just don't tell her. A great plan, obviously. So, when Hades burst through the earth like an over-enthusiastic stage magician and yanked Persephone underground, Zeus shrugged and went back to managing thunderclouds. Demeter, of course, was not informed. And when she starts to suspect the gods are involved, things escalate. She abandons Olympus, dons a dark cloak, and begins walking the earth in human form, barefoot and furious. She questions shepherds, interrogates nymphs, glares at wheat until it turns yellow. But no one knows anything, because the gods, for all their power, are terrible communicators. So she wanders, and wanders. Days blur, weeks vanish. The seasons forget what they're supposed to be doing. Historians still argue whether this was the first recorded instance of ecological collapse due to divine family drama. But one thing's certain: wherever Demeter walks, life begins to hesitate. It's not death, exactly, just the suggestion of it. Flowers bloom too late, rivers run slower, bees buzz aimlessly, unsure where to land, and beneath it all, beneath your feet, beneath your thoughts, Persephone waits. Because time flows differently in the underworld. And while her mother roams and the world wilts, she is adjusting, not screaming, not crying, just waiting for what she isn't sure. But the silence is louder than she expected, and the shadows, they're starting to whisper. You're still walking. Not fast, there's no urgency now, just that slow, dusk-colored kind of movement your body does when your mind is somewhere else entirely. You're trying to piece things together. A girl gone missing, a goddess unraveling, and a king of shadows who apparently thinks kidnapping counts as courtship. Let's talk about him for a moment. Hades. He doesn't get a lot of fan art. Not the popular kind anyway. No flowing hair like Apollo, no thunderbolts like Zeus, no party tricks like Dionysus. Hades is quiet. He's the god of the underworld, but not in a flaming pitchfork way. He doesn't punish souls, that's more the job of Minos or the Furies or just bad decisions. Hades rules the place, keeps it running, paperwork, boundaries, security clearance for ghosts. He lives among the dead, but he's not exactly of them. Imagine being that guy, middle brother, less famous, less liked, given the least glamorous real estate in the cosmos and told, you're in charge of all the dead people forever. Bye. No wonder he's moody. Historians still argue whether Hades genuinely loved Persephone or just wanted a queen because ruling alone was unbearable. But either way, he sees her. That one afternoon in the meadow, she's laughing at a bird. She's chasing a butterfly that doesn't want to be caught. And something in Hades down in the underworld shifts. He doesn't march up to Olympus and announce his intentions like a respectable deity. No. He goes to Zeus, his brother, her father, and says something like, I've seen the girl. I want to marry her. And Zeus, as previously mentioned, says, fine, with the spiritual enthusiasm of a man dodging responsibility for the 8th time that morning. No one talks to Persephone. No one asks her what she wants. No one even tells her what's coming. Back in the underworld, Hades gets ready. He picks the horses. He polishes the chariot. He even probably arranges for the flower, the narcissus, to bloom just right. Is that creepy? Yes, very. But in myth, consent often arrives centuries too late. So, the plan unfolds. The flower appears. The earth splits. And Hades takes her. Now let's pause, because something subtle happens here. You might expect Persephone to scream, to demand to be returned, to curse him or fight or melt into sobs. But she doesn't, at least not for long. Instead, she watches, listens, learns, because the underworld is not chaos. It's order, rules, boundaries, unchanging seasons. And Persephone, unlike her Olympian relatives, has never had rules before. Up there on the surface, she was always someone's daughter, Demeter's, Zeus's, an afterthought in most family meetings. But down here, she's the only thing alive. She walks the asphodel fields, watches the dead whisper to each other in voices like wind in a cave. She touches the sticks, cold, oily, unyielding. She sits beside Hades, silent, listening to judgments passed and souls sorted. He doesn't try to impress her. He doesn't try to charm her, which ironically is what starts to work. Persephone isn't in love, but she isn't afraid anymore either. She's curious, because the longer she stays, the more she realizes this place needs her. Not to brighten it, not to fix it, but to balance it. And balance is something even gods forget about. So, while Demeter searches and Olympus twiddles its golden thumbs, Persephone begins to understand something no one ever explained to her, that she is not a child, that her power isn't in her beauty or her lineage or even her immortality. It's in her ability to choose, even in a place designed to erase choices, and that changes everything. There's something strange about silence underground. It's not empty exactly, not like silence above where the world merely pauses. Down here, it's layered thick with old thoughts and half-forgotten regrets, echoing off the walls of the underworld like dust drifting through air that never moves. Persephone listens to footsteps that make no sound, to shadows that don't quite match their owners, to the way Hades clears his throat before speaking, like he's still not used to having company. You might expect torches, but the light here is more ambient, like moonlight that's never seen the moon. The walls of his palace are carved from black rock, smooth and veined with silver that never tarnishes. There are no windows, no time. You don't need clocks in a place where nothing grows. At least, that's what Persephone thought until now. Hades is patient. Not warm, not chatty, just patient. He doesn't demand anything from her. He doesn't even call her queen. He just lets her be. And it's that quiet that begins to undo her. Because when no one is telling you what to feel, not a mother, not a god, not a myth, You start asking yourself what you actually want. That question takes root. Meanwhile, up top, Demeter is done waiting. Her search has turned into a curse. Wherever she walks now, she strips color from the trees. Cornfields, dry, mid-harvest. Fruit rots on the vine. She doesn't mean to. But grief is a blunt instrument. Mortals begin to panic. The soil cracks. Livestock starve. And still Zeus does nothing classic. Eventually, it's Helios, the sun god himself, who steps in probably because his light is reflecting off too many dead fields. He tells Demeter what happened, about the flower, the chariot, the not-so-little abduction. And Demeter, she doesn't weep. She doesn't faint. She just stops. She lets the fields die. She lets winter fall for the first time in the history of Earth. And Zeus, finally looks around and thinks, maybe this is a problem. So he does what he always does when something needs fixing. He sends Hermes. Now Hermes, bless him, is the closest thing the Greek pantheon has to a middle manager. Winged shoes, cheeky smile, terrible boundaries. He doesn't really want this job. He's busy ferrying souls and stealing cattle and being generally overstimulated. But orders are orders. So Hermes descends. The air gets colder the farther he goes, not from temperature but from stillness. He finds Persephone not locked in a tower or weeping in a corner. He finds her sitting beside Hades, calmly watching a soul plead its case before the judges of the dead. She turns, sees Hermes, and in that moment something flickers in her eyes. Not shock, not joy, just decision. She rises slowly, and Hermes delivers his message. Demeter demands your return. Earth is dying. Time to go home. But before Persephone can answer, Hades speaks. He holds out a bowl. In it the seeds of a pomegranate, red, wet, glistening like tiny rubies that forgot how to glitter. He says nothing, but the meaning is clear. Now here's the part that scholars still fight over. Did Persephone know the rules? Did she understand that eating anything in the underworld meant she could never fully leave? Or did she eat because she was hungry, because she was curious, or just maybe because she chose to stay? No one agrees. But she lifts the bowl, takes 6 seeds, bites. Each one pops between her teeth, soft, sweet, bitter at the end. And just like that, everything changes. The deal is struck. Not a full return, not a full exile. 6 months above, 6 months below. No one wins, no one loses, except maybe Demeter and Hades and Persephone. But also, maybe they all grow. That's how myths work, right? Nobody gets what they want, but they all get what they need. You wake not from sleep, but from stillness. Above ground, the frost has begun to loosen its grip. A whisper runs through the roots. Something is moving. Something is coming back. And then a crack, a green tip pushing through dry soil, a snowdrop, a crocus, a nervous breath of color after so many months of gray. It is spring, but not a spring born of sunlight and time. This one is forged from a mother's tears and a daughter's return. Persephone rises, not dramatically, no glittering beam of light or choir of birds, just a quiet reappearance, a pair of feet brushing against new grass, a face turned toward a sky that looks a little different now, because everything has changed. She stands still for a moment, adjusting to air that moves again, to flowers that bloom for her, like old friends she isn't sure she missed. And then, from the horizon, Demeter. She doesn't run. She walks with the strange stillness of someone who has rehearsed this reunion 1,000 times in her mind. When they reach each other, they do not speak. They just hold on. And something warm flows into the world again. Crops begin to stir. Trees shift with sudden green. Animals blink into life like someone remembered to press resume. Spring is loud this time. Too loud. A little reckless, as if the earth is trying to compensate for the loss, the silence, the frozen months. Even the birds seem extra chirpy, like they've been holding in every note since November. But underneath the joy, there's something quieter in Persephone. She is not the girl who left, and Demeter knows it. The mother tries to carry on preparing feasts, organizing festivals, planting new barley fields with excessive enthusiasm. But the daughter, she drifts. Her hands touch flowers she doesn't remember liking. She smiles, but not often. And she walks more than she talks, because she knows what's coming. 6 months. It sounds long, but it isn't. Not when you've seen the place where time holds its breath. Now here's the interesting thing. Mortals notice the change too. Not just in the land, but in the girl. They start telling stories. In some versions, Persephone was tricked, innocent, helpless, doomed. In others, she was complicit, or clever, or wrathful. Historians still debate which is closer to the truth, but Persephone doesn't explain. She doesn't correct or confirm. She just lives. 6 months of warmth, of birdsong and grain, of walks at dusk, with her hair catching the gold of a low sun. And then, when the time comes, she goes. Again, not dramatically, no thunderclap, no spiral staircase into shadow, just a soft fading, like a light turning inward, a flower folding closed for the night. She returns to the underworld, not as a prisoner, but as a queen, because that's what the story doesn't always tell you, that Persephone over time becomes two people, Spring's daughter and Shadow's ruler. She doesn't choose one. She holds both, and in doing so, she becomes something far more powerful than any Olympian ever planned for. You follow her now, not in sunlight, but in shadow, not as a child of bloom and meadow, but as something deeper, darker still. Persephone descends again, but this time, she doesn't flinch. She doesn't look back at the field, or search the sky for her mother's face. She walks, step by step. Her sandals silent against the stone. The air cools, not unpleasantly, just enough to remind her she's crossing a threshold, leaving the world of becoming for the world of what has already been. The underworld doesn't greet her loudly. There's no cheering crowd, no trumpets, just the stillness of a kingdom that waited and knew she would return. Hades is there, of course, waiting at the foot of the path. He doesn't smile exactly, but he inclines his head. Respect, not possession. You watch her take her place beside him, not behind, not below. Beside. Her throne is carved of the same stone, but smoother, shaped to her spine, molded to her weight. She doesn't sit right away. She walks the hall first, and the dead watch her with eyes that do not blink. They do not speak, but they feel her, because Persephone has returned, not as someone stolen, not as someone traded, but as someone who chose. She walks the banks of Lethe and does not drink. She touches the edges of Tartarus and does not tremble. She listens to the Eumenides' whisper of crimes and balances the scales herself. This is not just myth. This is governance. This is rule. And slowly something shifts in the underworld. A warmth, not heat, not light, begins to glow in its bones. Not enough to grow flowers, but enough to let the idea of flowers breathe. The asphodel meadows bloom wider. The judges grow more nuanced in their questions. The dead begin to walk with less fear, because their queen walks among them, not with pity, not with power, with presence. Here's a fact in ancient Greek rituals. Persephone was sometimes invoked not just in spring, but during burials as the one who made death less frightening, not kinder, not easier, but more known. And that matters, because fear most of all feeds on what we don't understand. So, Persephone brings structure. She introduces cycles. She gives the underworld what no other god could: seasons. Historians still argue whether this was her idea or simply an echo of her travels. But once she begins her pattern, 6 months above, 6 months below, the very bones of time begin to reorganize. Spring returns, then fades. Summer bursts, then wilts. Autumn sighs and winter exhales, and each shift hits her not just in wheat and petals, in the air, in the balance. Even the gods begin to adjust. Demeter learns not to beg. Zeus predictably pretends he planned the whole thing. And Hades, he never asks her to stay, but he builds her a garden. Yes, a garden in the middle of the underworld, with soil made of ash and memory, with water drawn from the Styx, purified through obsidian channels, with ghostly fruit that doesn't rot, but hums with silent sweetness. And Persephone, she plants, not flowers, not herbs, seeds, ideas, one by one, and the dead begin to gather, not just to mourn, but to remember. They sit in her garden, They whisper stories they'd forgotten they carried. They weep softly, not from pain, but from presence. And the garden grows. It is not spring, it is not life. It is something else entirely. And it's hers. You feel it first in the trees. Their branches don't sway as much. Leaves curl inward, unsure of themselves. The light seems thinner, as though the sun is beginning to hesitate. Demeter feels it too. Not all at once, just a tightness in the air, a hollowness in her chest. A knowing. The time has come. Persephone has gone below, and so the world begins to pause. Not die, just pause. Grains slow their growth. Bees stay closer to home. The heat of summer cools, not with relief, but with reluctance. The seasons are changing again. But now, people expect it. They've seen this story play out before. They plant differently. They harvest earlier. They brace. And Demeter, well, she doesn't rage anymore. She withdraws back into caves, into shrines, into long walks through empty fields where nothing listens except the soil. She doesn't cry. She waits. Because winter now is not just cold. It is personal. A mother's mourning carved into weather patterns. And yet, while she waits, something new emerges. Ritual. Mortals begin to mark the shift with stories, with fire, with offerings placed gently at the edge of groves. They bake special breads. They light candles. They leave out honey and seeds, not for the gods, but for her, for the girl who leaves and returns, the girl who became both. They start calling her Kor when she's in the fields, and Persephone when she rules below. 2 names, 1 goddess. People whisper her name when seeds are planted. They call to her when loved ones die. They draw her face on pottery and hang her likeness in doorways, not for protection, but for remembrance, because her story has become their story. Every mother, every daughter, every loss that turns to waiting. Historians still argue whether the Eleusinian mysteries began as harvest rites or grief rituals. But all agree on one thing. Persephone became more than myth. She became meaning. And Demeter. She watches, not with joy, not yet, but with acceptance. Because now at least the pain has a shape, a season, a return. You follow her through the winter. You see her stop at stone altars, brushing away frost with calloused hands. You hear her hum lullabies that once coaxed barley from the dirt. You watch as she draws spirals in the dust symbols of cycles of return of hope. And beneath all of it, the land listens. It sleeps, yes, but not forever. Because just below the surface, where roots dream and rivers mumble in their sleep, Persephone is waiting too. Not trapped, not stolen, just resting. Until the earth warms, until the flowers stretch, until the world remembers how to wake. You're back underground now. But this time you're not following Persephone. You're beside her, close enough to hear the sound of her footsteps brushing against obsidian tiles, close enough to catch the scent of something impossible, pomegranate blossoms. Yes, even here. She doesn't speak much in these months, not out of coldness, but out of certainty. Everything in her gaze says, I've done this before, and I will do this again. Because now the Underworld doesn't just belong to Hades. It bends to her rhythm. It pauses when she pauses. It changes when she changes. And with her return, something stirs that even the oldest spirits don't understand. They feel hope, not for life, but for meaning. She walks the river Styx with quiet reverence. The waters don't rage. They hum. You notice something curious. There are bridges now. Thin ones, stone rope, bone crossing small tributaries of the dead's many rivers. Persephone ordered them built, not to make the dead leave, but to help them find each other. You see two souls meet in her garden after years, maybe centuries apart. They don't speak. They just sit, side by side, watching silver asphodels shiver in the windless air. Here's your historical fact. In some Orphic traditions, Persephone is not just queen of the dead. She's the mother of rebirth, a figure whose presence allows souls to prepare for their next life, a spiritual midwife for the reincarnating. Historians still argue whether this belief stemmed from early Pythagorean doctrines or later syncretic cults. But here in this story, you feel the weight of it. She doesn't push the souls. She doesn't rush them forward. She lets them rest. And rest is a radical thing in a world obsessed with momentum. In her quiet domain, Persephone tends to what most gods ignore: pause, not sleep, not death, but sacred in between. Even Hades watches her work with something like awe. He doesn't try to command the souls anymore. He lets her decide. Because rule isn't just about power, it's about presence. Now look over there. There's a new path winding through the edge of the cavern, lined with black vines and glowing mushrooms. It leads to a pool so still it reflects even your breath. Persephone visits it every morning, not to bathe, not to pray, just to sit. She doesn't look at her reflection. She looks through it, as though seeing the world above through memory's veil. What is she thinking? Maybe about grain in her mother's fields, maybe about the way sunlight tastes when it touches your collarbone, maybe about the next time she will rise, or maybe she's not thinking at all, just feeling, just being. And isn't that the most divine thing of all? Meanwhile, above ground, mortals mark her absence. They build shrines, not grand temples, but small private spaces, a stone under a tree, a woven wreath by a window, a candle flickering behind drawn curtains. In Eleusis, the mysteries grow. Pilgrims arrive barefoot, blindfolded, silent. They're not here to worship. They're here to remember. They drink the kykeon of barley and mint drink of unclear composition, and then they descend into darkened halls, reenacting a story no one is allowed to speak of, not because it's shameful, because it's sacred. Their mouths remain shut, but their eyes wide, because they've seen the journey from light to dark, from maiden to queen, from loss to something that still has shape and pulse. No one leaves the mysteries unchanged. Even Plato, centuries later, would say that initiation into Persephone's rites taught the soul how to die. How to die. Let that sink in. Because maybe the most powerful myth isn't one that tells you how to live. It's one that teaches you how to let go, how to disappear with dignity, and how to return. Now let's pause a moment, not to stop the story, but to breathe with it. You're in a world without clocks now. No day, no night, just rhythm. And in that rhythm, Persephone reigns. You watch her step into her garden again, not with fanfare, not with followers, alone. She presses her palm into the soil. It accepts her without question. A vine curls gently around her wrist. A bloom opens at her feet, ghostly, pale, pulsing, with something between memory and music. She smiles. Not for anyone, just for herself. Because this place, it's hers. It always was. And when she's ready, she will rise. But not yet. Not yet. You're not counting days anymore. Because time here is not counted. It's felt. Like the slow rise of warmth in your chest after a long cold. Like the hum beneath your skin before a thunderstorm. The underworld doesn't operate on clocks or calendars. It listens for footsteps. And somewhere deep inside the walls of shadow and silver, the dead feel it too. Persephone's reign is steady now, not tentative, not borrowed. She doesn't ask permission to rule. She simply is. She doesn't wear a crown of gold. Hers is woven of dried wheat, obsidian chips, and dark petals. Not flashy, not delicate, but earned. You follow her down one of the deeper corridors today, a place not meant for judgment or justice, but for memory. These halls aren't filled with treasure or scrolls. They're filled with sounds. Yes, sounds. Laughter. Crying. A baby's first breath. A grandmother's last sigh. Echoes stored like sacred offerings in the stone. You touch one wall. It trembles just slightly. 1,000 voices asleep inside. Persephone stops at one and listens. She doesn't smile. She doesn't cry. She just nods. It's enough. Because she knows these echoes are all that's left for some. And that is not nothing, that's everything. Meanwhile, Hades waits nearby, not to intrude, just to be present. He's learned over time that Persephone doesn't need saving, or silencing, or explaining. She needs space, and he gives it. Now here's something peculiar on this day. The air shifts. just a little. A low thrumming vibration from the ceiling of the cavern. A tremor through the soles of your feet. The beginning of the end. Of this season anyway. The dead feel it first. They stand a little straighter. They start telling stories they hadn't thought of in centuries. They look toward the garden with something like anticipation. Because they know Persephone will leave soon. Not vanish. Not abandon. Ascend. But for now, she finishes her work. She visits the fields of punishment, not to pardon, but to witness. Some of those souls beg her. Others look away. A few thank her. She doesn't judge. She just watches. And the watchers feel seen. Even in pain, there is dignity. Even in punishment, there is presence. Here's your mainstream historical moment. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus descends to the underworld and meets Persephone, but not as a damsel or victim. She is described as powerful, even terrifying, a force to be respected. And yet centuries later, poets soften her, make her gentle, make her spring incarnate. But the truth, she is both, gentle when needed, fierce when required. A goddess who learned from loss, but did not let it define her. She defines it. You follow her back toward her garden now, not lush, not in the way you'd expect, but full, quietly full. Berries that don't ripen, but remember. Flowers that bloom in grayscale. Vines that grow in loops, as if tracing memory's path. She stops before a low stone bench and waits. A soul approaches. A child. No older than 5, they sit together. No words. Just silence. And in that silence, the underworld holds its breath. This isn't about death. It's about what comes after. Grief has stopped screaming, when all that's left is the need to be held. And Persephone, she does not flinch from that need. She honors it. And now the whispers begin to rise in the caves. She will go soon. She will bring light again. She will return. And the souls they prepare. They don't cry. They don't wail. They plant. Yes, they plant. Seeds that won't bloom until her feet touch the upper soil. Seeds that know without her presence they sleep. But with her return, they will sing. And so the underworld becomes quiet again, not out of fear, but reverence. A queen is about to rise, not from rebellion, not from rescue, from rhythm. You feel it before you see it. The pulse, that strange slow thrum in the bones of the world. It starts somewhere far above, maybe on a hill where a crow circles bare trees, or in the first crack of thawed ice against a farmer's boot. But it makes its way down here to the underworld, rattling loose the silence. And Persephone knows. She stands at the center of her garden, now not waiting, not hesitant, just ready. Ready to rise, ready to become again. It doesn't happen all at once. There is no glowing portal, no trumpet blast, no whirlwind of leaves and light. There is only this, a breath. Her breath, drawn in slowly like a hand tracing the edge of a bowl, and with it everything begins to shift. The dead step back, not in fear, but in respect. They understand what this moment means. They've seen it before, and still it moves them. A hush falls. Even Hades is still. He watches not as a husband guarding his prize, but as a ruler, recognizing a sovereign power rising beside him. This is not loss. This is transfer. She walks the length of the garden one last time, her fingers grazing the ghost fruit, whispering to the flowers, pausing near the stone bench where she sat with the child. Each step forward leaves behind a memory, not an abandonment, an offering. Then, without ceremony, she lifts the hem of her dark robe, gathers the folds, and walks upward through the tunnels that spiral like shells, past the rivers that ripple against time, toward the place where the ceiling of the underworld is thinner, where it presses closest to the skin of the world above. Here's a fringe detail for you. Ancient mystery cults often believed Persephone didn't rise through the ground, but through water, lakes, springs, even mist-covered pools in caves. Places where light bent strangely and sound moved like memory. Historians still argue whether these pools were real ritual sites or just metaphors. But metaphor or not, you follow her now, into the echoing passage, the one lined with roots like fingers and old breath. And then, there it is, that moment, the in-between, where your ears pop, where your skin tingles, where light is not yet light, and dark no longer clings, where she rises, and the world, it responds. You hear it in the cracking ice, the stretching branches, the hush before the first birdsong. Spring is not a season. Spring is a goddess returning. She emerges not in a blaze of glory, but in a soft step, one bare foot on cool soil, then another. Her dress is still dark, but the edges glisten with dew. Her hair holds the scent of moss and ash and silver roots. She doesn't smile. Not yet. The sun finds her. She blinks. And just like that, color returns. Not all at once, but slowly. Green returns to branches. Blossoms nod awake. The bees remember their purpose. Mortals begin to stir. They don't know why, but they clean their homes, open their windows, wash their feet. They step into temples and speak her name, Cor Persephone, Lady of Return. Some do not know the story, but they feel it in their chests, in their blood, in the sudden ache to begin again. Back in Eleusis, the mysteries whisper of renewal. They say she's come back. They say she has not forgotten them. They say the seeds in their hands will grow again. And Demeter, she feels it too. Not a vision, not a messenger, just warmth. Somewhere in her bones a tiny ember pulses. She turns to the fields, she lifts her staff, and the earth exhales. Here's a mainstream historical truth. The Eleusinian Mysteries promised initiates that they would no longer fear death, not because they were promised paradise, but because they had seen return, because they had watched Persephone come back, not as a victim, not as a ghost, but as herself. And so, now you watch her move through the trees, through the wind, through the places where frost pulls back like a curtain. She touches bark, and the sap stirs. She passes gardens, and the soil hums. She enters homes in dreams, and people wake with tears in their eyes, not knowing why. She is here. She is back. And everything in the world, from the deepest worm to the tallest birch, remembers how to live. But more than that, they remember how to wait. Because Persephone's greatest gift isn't just life. It's the knowledge that darkness ends, that silence doesn't last forever, that return is possible, even for you, even now. Now you're standing in a field. It isn't lush yet. The grass is patchy. The air is damp. But there's that smell, wet soil, and something green underneath it, waiting. Persephone has returned. And while the birds aren't quite ready to sing full symphonies, they chirp a few scattered notes, like someone warming up before telling a very old, very important story. She walks barefoot still, not out of forgetfulness, but because she wants to feel the earth again. Not just see it, not just rule over it, feel it. And the earth feels her too. Roots beneath the surface stretch toward her. Clover peeks its head above ground to check if it's safe to bloom. She doesn't rush. Persephone never rushes. Instead, she kneels, presses both palms into the dirt, and the ground doesn't tremble, it softens. Because that's what she does, doesn't she? She softens what's been hard. She gives breath to what's held its breath for months. She says nothing, and in that silence life hears a yes. This is the moment Demeter feels it for real. Not hope, not faith, proof. She doesn't need a chariot. She doesn't need a sign. She just starts walking across a ridge through a grove toward her daughter. And when they see each other, they don't collapse into sobs. They don't fall into each other's arms. They just look. And in that look, everything is restored. Because when you know someone will always return, truly return, you don't need to cling. You just need to see.
Now here's your historical highlight. Many Greek sources describe the reunion of Demeter and Persephone as the true heart of the Eleusinian mysteries. Not the abduction, not the descent, but the moment of recognition. Historians still argue whether this myth is about agricultural cycles or psychological healing. But really, why not both? Because when Persephone comes back, it's not just flowers that bloom, it's mothers, it's memory, it's meaning. Now let's go further. Persephone returns to the world, but she doesn't become the maiden again. She doesn't forget the underworld. She doesn't shrug off her crown. She brings it with her. Oh, it's subtle. No parade, no trumpet, just the way she carries herself, the way even the bees give her space. She walks past a fig tree, and it bends slightly, not from wind, from deference, because they remember who she is now, the girl who went down, but also the queen who came back. And she brings gifts, not gold, not jewels, but something more precious, seeds, seeds that can only germinate after time and darkness, seeds that sleep all winter and only wake in the presence of trust. She gives these to the people, not all at once, just a handful here, a pouch there, to the old woman with cracked hands and a quiet ache in her chest, to the young man who just buried his father and hasn't spoken in 2 weeks, to the child who has nightmares of falling through cold soil, and to you. Yes, you get one too, a single seed, small, smooth, dark as obsidian, and warm in your palm. You don't ask what it will grow. She wouldn't tell you, even if you did, because some things you only learn by planting and waiting and trusting, that what looks like stillness is actually preparation, that the cold months weren't wasted, that down below in the quietest part of the year, something sacred was being formed. She walks through a village now, unannounced, but the women know. They hang garlands on their doors. The men bring out fresh bread and bowls of olive oil. The children whisper and leave drawings at her feet. She doesn't linger. She doesn't bless. She just moves, and the ground hums. There's one more thing you should know. In some versions of her myth, Persephone chooses to eat the pomegranate seeds, not because she was tricked, but because she wanted to remember. Historians debate this twist, of course. They argue about its implications: free will versus fate, innocence versus agency. But maybe she chose it all. The descent, the return, the seed. Because being both maiden and queen light and shadow is the most powerful thing she could ever be. And so she walks on, not toward a throne, not toward applause, toward the season, the one that blooms behind her footsteps. You feel it now too, don't you? That soft shift in your own breath. The sense that even in your quiet, something is beginning again. You still hold the seed. You still hear her footsteps. And though the night outside your window may be long, you know she came back. And so can you. You're still holding the seed. It doesn't glow. It doesn't hum. It doesn't promise miracles. It just waits. Like Persephone once waited deep below, beneath roots and stone and memory. And now she walks beside you again, not in a dream, not in legend, but in this very moment, your moment. She doesn't ask you to follow. She doesn't command. She leads by moving quietly, purposefully, like someone who understands that growth doesn't need to shout. So, where are we going now? You walk together into a grove. It smells like eucalyptus bark and the first cut of spring grass. You hear the sound of bees, not frantic, just focused,
Persephone pauses beside a low bush of thyme. The wind catches her hair, and in that second, the whole grove leans closer. Even the light filters differently through the branches when she's near. You both sit on a moss-covered stone. Nothing fancy, just comfortable. And that's when she does something odd. She reaches into her robe and pulls out a small, worn object. It's a mirror, polished bronze, old, scratched, clearly used. She doesn't offer it to you. She just holds it out angled so that you can see your own reflection beside hers. You look, and for a moment your face seems softer, not younger, not changed, just more real, like you've been seen, like the person looking back is finally allowed to rest. Persephone doesn't speak, but the mirror says enough. You've made it through another winter. You are not buried, you are planted. You are allowed to come back. Here's a quirky historical fact for you. In certain local cults, Persephone wasn't just linked to seasons. She was invoked by midwives. Yes, women delivering babies called upon her name. Why? Because she understood what it meant to descend, endure, and emerge. To leave behind one world, even temporarily, and re-enter a new one transformed. Historians still argue whether this connection came from Eleusinian rites or later syncretism. But it fits, doesn't it? Because birth is not so different from return. Both require courage. Both come with pain. And both whisper, "It's time." Back in the grove, Persephone stands, brushes a bit of soil off her palms, and begins to plant something near your feet. She doesn't name it. You don't ask. But when her fingers press into the earth, you swear you hear something exhale. Not her, the ground, as if even the soil had been holding its breath all winter, as if her touch reminded it what it means to give life. And now you're alone again, not abandoned, just entrusted. The seed in your hand grows warm. The mirror's image lingers behind your eyes, and the sound of bees fades into your own quiet heartbeat. It's still early spring in this story. There's work to do. There's blooming ahead, but none of it has to be rushed. Because if Persephone has taught you anything, it's this: you can take your time. You can return slowly. You can grow quietly and still change everything. You wake before dawn. Or maybe you weren't really asleep, just drifting in that tender place where thoughts unravel like old thread. Outside your window, the sky is the soft color of ash, touched at the edges with the faintest whisper of rose. The air smells like it remembers something sweet: damp earth, cut grass, maybe rain that hasn't fallen yet. You sit up. The seed Persephone gave you is still there. You didn't plant it last night. You thought you might forget it, might roll onto it in your sleep or knock it to the floor, but no, it's warm in your hand. Still waiting, you take it with you. The world is quiet this early. Birdsong hasn't quite begun. Just the creak of old branches, the occasional sigh of wind. You walk barefoot through the garden. Yes, your garden, even if it's just a patch of balcony, even if it's imaginary. You kneel. There's a patch of soil beside a half-grown herb, the perfect spot. You dig gently with your fingers, pressing the seed into the earth with more reverence than skill, and, as you cover it with soil, a strange thought settles in. You're not planting hope. You're planting memory, because the seed isn't just a gift from a goddess. It's proof that you made it through the descent, that you carried your grief through the quiet months, that you endured the long blank spaces no one else could see. And now you're making something new. Here's a mainstream historical fact. In some versions of the Eleusinian Mysteries, initiates were shown an ear of grain in the final ritual. Just that, a stalk of wheat. Nothing dramatic. But for them, it was the most sacred thing they'd ever witnessed. Because they understood life returns. Always. Quietly. Relentlessly. And Persephone, she didn't just promise spring. She proved it. But let's zoom in on something strange now. There's a lesser-known version of the myth. It says that when Persephone returned from the Underworld, the first time she didn't speak for 3 days. Not a word, not out of fear, but because her body had to relearn sound. Because when you've lived in silence for long enough, even joy can feel like noise. Historians debate whether this version was metaphor or tradition, but the image lingers, a goddess walking among blooming fields, utterly quiet, letting birdsong and blossoms do the talking. And maybe that's you now. You don't have to declare anything, not yet. You don't have to tell the world you're okay. You don't even have to believe it fully yourself. You just have to walk quietly for a while. Let the light land on your skin again. Let your hands remember what it feels like to create. Let your body stretch without apology. You are not broken. You are between seasons. And in this in-between there's magic. The kind of magic that doesn't sparkle or flash. The kind that roots deep and waits for the right moment to reach for the sky. Back in the story, Persephone is doing the same. She's planting too. Not just seeds, but moments. Moments that will become stories for the next cycle. A woman kneeling in the dirt. A child whispering a prayer. A stranger lighting a candle at a crossroads. None of them know they're part of a myth. But they are. And so are you. You get up from the dirt, brush your hands, and stand in the stillness. You don't need applause. You don't need clarity. You just need the next breath, which comes. And then another. And then the sun crests the horizon, soft gold, unhurried. And the garden exhales. And so do you. The sun is fully up now. Not harsh, just that slow golden spill across the world, like honey, warmed in a quiet kitchen. You feel it on your skin before you see it. Warmth, not blazing, not dramatic, but steady, like someone gently placing a hand on your back and saying, "I'm here." Persephone is already walking. She's not headed to a temple or throne. She's walking through fields, past scarecrows and clotheslines and puddles where frogs have started gathering again. No one rushes to greet her. No one kneels. but they notice. The way the grass seems to lean in, the way even the cows lift their heads and blink slowly, like they know something holy is happening, even if they don't have words for it. You follow her, not because she asks, but because you want to. You reach a town, small, nothing carved in marble, just red roofs, clay pots, wood fences, leaning with age. There's a baker outside, slapping dough on a table. He glances up and nods, doesn't say a word. A girl runs by with a wreath of daisies tangled in her curls. Persephone smiles. A woman sweeping her steps pauses, leans on the broom, wipes her forehead. Persephone offers her a fig. And that's the thing about her return. It isn't about being seen. It's about noticing. Everywhere she walks, things wake up a little. Not because they were dead, but because they'd forgotten they were alive. And you start to notice it too. The curl of steam from a teacup, the way ivy claws up brick, the tiny green blade splitting concrete. These things were always there. You just didn't see them. But now your eyes are tuned to return. You sit with Persephone at the edge of a courtyard. She peels a pomegranate. Doesn't offer it yet. Instead, she asks something with her eyes. Not a question you can answer with words, just, are you ready to remember? Because the fruit isn't about punishment. It's about memory. It's the reminder that you've been below, that you've seen shadow, that you made it back. And now you can carry that with you, without fear. Here's a quirky historical tidbit. Some ancient Greeks believed that eating pomegranate bound you to the afterlife, but others saw it as a sacred food of fertility, royalty, even wisdom, a symbol that could mean endings or beginnings, depending on the bite. Historians still debate which came first. Was Persephone's story shaped by the pomegranate? Or did the fruit become sacred because of her? Either way, she eats. 3 seeds, 6 seeds. The number changes depending on who tells it, but the act remains the same. She chooses to remember, not just the light, not just the spring, but the whole cycle. And now it's your turn. You take the slice she offers. It's cool, soft tart. You chew slowly like each bite is a spell, because maybe it is. Maybe memory is magic. Maybe grief isn't something to outrun. Maybe it's a map showing you where you've been, what you've survived, what parts of you are still underground, still blooming in the dark. Persephone doesn't lecture. She doesn't interpret your dreams. She just sits and eats and watches the sky change color. Sometimes that's all you need from a goddess. Not power, not thunder, just presence. And in that silence you feel it again. Not joy, not quite, but something better, belonging to the cycle, to the season, to yourself. And that belonging, it doesn't shout, it hums, like roots under the soil, like the wind moving through olive branches, like your own breath, steady and slow. You sit together until the fig tree casts long shadows across the stones. And when she stands, you don't need to follow, because she's already left something with you, the memory of how to return, and the courage to do it again. Evening arrives gently. There's no announcement, no grand sweeping of clouds, no cinematic shift in the air, just a quiet softening of light. The sun stretches its golden fingers, brushes the tops of trees, then sighs its way toward the horizon. You're walking again. Not hurried, barefoot, hands trailing across fences, stone walls, tall grass. Persephone is ahead. Not far. But you don't need to catch up. She's not leading now. She's returning, not just to Earth, but to herself. You see it in the way she walks, not like a goddess, not like a queen, but like someone who has carried winter in her bones and still chose to bloom. There's a little stream ahead. It hums low and content like it knows things you've forgotten. Persephone steps into it. Cold, of course. It bites. But she doesn't flinch. She stands ankle deep, closes her eyes, and exhales. The current moves around her as if shy to touch her. You sit on a nearby rock knees, pulled in seed-stained fingers, resting on your lap. She opens her eyes and smiles. Not the smile of someone who's trying to be gracious, the smile of someone who remembers. She remembers what the darkness felt like. Not just mythological darkness, but the kind you know. The 3 a.m. kind. The I'm not sure I matter kind, the I can't do this anymore kind. And still, she returned. Here's your historical gem for tonight. In parts of rural Greece, well into the 19th century, women still honored Persephone with small spring rituals. They'd scatter barley, sing lullabies to the soil. Some even whispered into the ground as if sending messages to someone sleeping just beneath. Historians still argue whether these rituals were remnants of the mysteries or local inventions. But does it matter? The impulse is ancient, to greet return with softness. To welcome life not with fireworks, but with tenderness. You watch Persephone kneel and dip her hands into the water. She lifts them to her face, not to wash away the underworld, but to bless herself with it. Because down there, she learned something. That pain isn't always the enemy. That stillness isn't always empty. That what dies in winter may not be gone, just resting. And now she carries all of it, not as burden, as wisdom. You think of your own winters, the ones no one saw, the ones you carried with a smile stretched too thin. Maybe you didn't descend into a mythic underworld. Maybe you just made it through Tuesday. But it counts. Every moment you stayed when leaving felt easier counts. Every breath you took when your chest felt heavy with silence counts. You don't need to rise like a goddess. You just need to rise at all. Persephone steps out of the stream, shakes the water from her feet. She doesn't dry them. She lets them drip, lets the world feel her, and as the last light slips behind the hills, you realize something. This whole story, it isn't just hers, it's yours too. You're not a spectator. You're a seed carrier, a story bearer, and somewhere beneath your ribs, something is waking, not loudly, just stretching. Maybe you'll plant it tomorrow. Maybe you already did. Either way, it's real. and it's yours. It's nighttime now, but not the same kind of night you started with. Earlier, it was the sort of night that presses on your chest, that makes even quiet rooms feel loud. The kind of night where the ticking of a clock sounds like thunder, and your own thoughts feel like unwelcome guests who refuse to leave. Now the night feels gentler, not empty, just still. There's a fire nearby, low, soft. It doesn't blaze or crackle like the ones in stories. It hums, like it knows this isn't a place for spectacle. Persephone is sitting near it, not in a throne, not on a pedestal, just on a stone, like you. Knees drawn up, cloak around her shoulders, hair catching the firelight in little waves. She looks tired, but not broken, not small, full, like someone who has carried things you cannot imagine and made room for all of them without falling apart. She hands you something, not a scroll or a lesson, not a secret carved into bone, just bread, still warm, still fragrant with time, or maybe fennel. You can't quite place it, but it's the kind of smell that reminds you of someone who once loved you well. You bite. It's plain, a little dry, but it hits somewhere deep, somewhere soft inside your rib cage you didn't know was still waiting to be filled. You chew in silence. Persephone chews too, because even goddesses need food, even the ones who rule realms and walk between life and death, especially them. And so, for a long while, you say nothing, because what is there to say? She knows. She knows what it's like to sit in the dark and not be afraid, to feel grief and not try to solve it, to love things that will someday leave you. You glance at her. She's staring at the fire eyes, unfocused body, utterly still, in a way most people never are. You wonder how often she gets to rest like this. Maybe not often. Maybe being a goddess means people always want something from you. Power, prophecy, salvation. But tonight she's just here. So are you. And that's enough. Here's a mainstream historical fact for your fireside brain. In certain interpretations of the Eleusinian mysteries, Persephone wasn't just the goddess of the underworld. She was the initiator, the guide, the one who led people through the darkness, not out of it, but through. She didn't lift them into light, she helped them see in the dark. That changes everything, doesn't it? She's not your escape. She's your witness, and there's power in that. Sometimes you don't need rescue. You need someone to sit beside you and say, I see how heavy this is, and then not try to carry it away. Persephone doesn't ask you what you've lost. She doesn't list your burdens or weigh your worth. She just lets the night hold you both. And maybe that's the ritual, not incense, not chants, not sacred altars, just being together in the dark and not panicking, just letting the fire flicker and the bread cool and the breath settle. You take another bite. The crust scrapes the roof of your mouth just a little, but you like it. It reminds you that you're real, here, solid, not a shade, not a story, a person breathing beside a goddess who chooses to sit near you without needing to fix you. Now, for a quirkier fact, something most don't know. There was a belief in some corners of ancient rural Greece that if you whispered your grief into the bark of a certain tree, Persephone would hear it during her time in the underworld. Not act on it, not grant wishes, just hear it, because that was enough. To be heard, to be known by someone who won't flinch. Historians still argue whether this ritual was ever widely practiced or just a village myth passed down by firelight. But the imagery stays, you leaning against a tree, murmuring what you could never tell another soul, and a goddess somewhere in the dark, pausing just to listen. You glance up. The stars are clearer now, not dazzling, just there, scattered and unbothered. The kind of sky that doesn't shout, it just witnesses. And maybe that's the point. Maybe not everything needs to be bright and loud and fixed. Maybe healing can look like sitting still beside someone who already survived what you're going through. Persephone finishes her bread. She brushes the crumbs from her lap like it's any other day, like she isn't sacred, like she isn't stitched into the bones of the planet. You ask her not with words but with your eyes, "How do you carry it all?" She doesn't answer, not directly. She just draws a shape in the dirt beside her, a spiral. Simple, endless. No beginning, no end. Then she looks at you, and the message is clear. You don't carry it. You walk with it. You let it move beside you, not inside you. That's what she's done. All these centuries, all these cycles, she hasn't defeated grief. She's danced with it. You lean back just a little. Your spine cracks in 3 quiet places. You don't apologize. Persephone doesn't mind. She cracks her neck too, a little mortal twitch that feels oddly comforting. Gods get stiff too, apparently. The fire's dying. Soon you'll sleep, not because the story is over, but because it's time. That's something Persephone understands better than anyone. Not all things end. Some things just rest. Like seeds, like you, like the parts of you that haven't bloomed yet. But they will, and she'll be there when they do. You wake up slowly. Not the jarring kind of waking the one where you gasp and forget where you are for a moment. This is different. This is the kind of waking that unfolds like a leaf in warm sun. Quiet, gentle, almost like the night itself has decided, yes, now is the time. The fire has died down. Only a few glowing coals remain. Persephone is gone, not vanished in a puff of mythic smoke, just gone, like mist, like dreams that dissolve the second your eyes open. You sit up, your back is stiff, your mouth is dry, there's ash on your fingertips, pomegranate juice on your sleeves, proof that it all happened. Or maybe it didn't. You're not sure anymore, but you remember the feeling. And sometimes that's more real than the facts. You stretch arms overhead, spine arching, and breathe. And for the first time in a long time, The breath goes all the way down. No resistance. No lump in your throat. Just air. Moving in. Moving out. Like it trusts you again. You stand. The grass under your feet is cold with dew. Somewhere nearby, a bird dares to sing a single note, just one. Like it's testing the morning before committing. You smile. And just like that, the day begins. But something's different now. You're carrying her with you. Not in a metaphorical myth lives in me kind of way. In a real tangible way. Like a coat made of dusk. Like a pouch of seeds tied to your hip. Like a memory stitched behind your ribs that hums when you breathe just right. You walk toward the edge of the hill. The sun is peeking over the rise, not grand, not blinding, just showing up like you are. And that's when you feel it, the weight, but not the crushing kind. This is the weight of belonging, of being part of something older than language, of standing on the same soil as everyone who has ever risen again after falling. Here's your historical anchor for this morning. In ancient Greek funerary rites, the pomegranate was often placed in the hands or near the graves of the dead, not just as a symbol of death, but as a promise of return. That even in the deepest dark life stirs, that nothing is ever truly lost. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was, or whether it began with the cult of Demeter and Persephone, or was absorbed from earlier agricultural traditions. But the symbolism remains. You are buried. You grow. You rise. Again and again and again, you reach the path that leads down the hill. There's no grand arch, no flare of divine light, just dirt and stone and your own 2 feet. But somehow that's enough. You take the first step. It crunches. The second, softer. You look around half expecting her to appear again. But she doesn't. Because this is yours. She showed you the way through shadow. Now it's time to walk in light. But before you go, you reach into your pocket, and there it is. 1 seed. Just one. Dark red. Smooth. Cool. You smile. You don't eat it. Not yet. You tuck it back in. Because some memories are meant to be kept whole. Not consumed. Just held. Like a compass. Or a quiet promise. That no matter where you go, you can always return. Not to her. To yourself. The path beneath your feet narrows, winding now through low brush and whispering grass. The air is crisp in your nose and lungs like it hasn't been breathed yet. Everything smells new, even the dirt, even the silence. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, but because you don't want to miss anything. A breeze moves past you light, but insistent, the way a child tugs on a sleeve when they want to show you something. And you look, not because you expect some grand vision of Persephone reborn in gold light. You look because you've learned to. Because the dark taught you to notice the small, soft things that daylight often swallows. There in the curve of a rock is moss, thick and velvet green, damp like breath. And there a sprout so new it trembles. You crouch, letting your fingers hover just above it. This isn't about picking it or naming it. It's about recognizing it. This is what growth looks like. Not fast, not loud, just here. You stand again, brushing off your hands. Your fingertips smell like minerals and old roots, like secrets the earth has been keeping for millennia. You keep walking. The landscape shifts subtly. Trees begin to gather in clusters, their trunks like cathedral columns. Light spills through in broken shafts, painting the ground in fractured gold. And ahead, a clearing. You step into it, and immediately stop. Because it's not just space, it's presence. A grove circular and open to the sky, framed by trees that lean inward like eavesdroppers. At the center, a low stone altar, no markings, no offerings, just stone, weathered, patient. You approach it slowly and place your hand on its surface. It's cold, then warm, then just stone again. You sit beside it not out of reverence, but out of respect. This is not a temple, not a shrine. This is memory. And somewhere inside you, that single pomegranate seed pulses, slow, steady, ancient. Here's your bit of history, now that we're settled in some rural traditions of northern Greece. Long after the formal temples had crumbled, villagers would still gather in groves on the equinox. They'd sit in circles, speak no words, and simply listen to the earth, believing that Persephone would pass through unseen, but not unfelt. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were remnants of pre-Hellenic belief or simply folk invention. But their power lay in repetition, in showing up, year after year, even when no gods arrived. Because maybe they did. Just quietly, just enough. You lie back now, against the mossy ground. Above you, the sky is too wide to hold all at once. A pale cloud drifts aimless. A hawk circles far off a single thread in the sky's great fabric. Your fingers brush the grass, and you realize something. The world is not asking you to be powerful. It's asking you to be present, not always strong, not always ready. Just here, to feel the grass under your nails, to hear your own breath unfurling slow and steady, to know that you came through something and are still here. You close your eyes. For a moment, the world softens into breath and heartbeat. Then a laugh. Not yours, not far. A woman's voice, light as ash, playful. You open your eyes slowly. No one there. But the air tastes like pomegranate again. You smile. She's gone, or maybe never left. You rise and walk toward the far edge of the grove, not to leave her behind, but to carry her forward, like a seed under your tongue, like fire behind your ribs, like a story you're just beginning to tell. The trail beyond the grove is narrower, more tangled, not dangerous, just shy, like it hasn't been walked in a while, like the forest is curious about you, but hasn't decided if it wants to let you through. You step gently. No need to rush. The air is thicker here, green and humming, alive with things. Unseen roots threading beneath your feet. Insects murmuring from inside bark, birds whispering gossip to each other, just out of sight. You duck beneath a low branch. It brushes your hair, not in warning, in welcome. The deeper you go, the quieter the world becomes. Not empty, just focused. Like this place remembers what humans forgot. You pause beside a tree with bark rough as old leather. There's something carved into it, barely visible under moss. You clear a bit with your thumb. Just 2 lines, not words. A spiral, and beneath it, a seed, not drawn, placed. A real one. Dark, hard, full of potential. You stare at it for a long moment. Someone was here before you. Someone came through the dark, and instead of leaving instructions or warnings, they left permission. Permission to begin again, to plant something, to let time do its slow, strange work. You don't take the seed. You leave it. It isn't yours, but your fingers drift to your own pocket. The pomegranate seed is still there. Cool, steady, waiting. You walk on, and soon the forest begins to thin. The trees part like curtains, and you step into a place that smells like sun-warmed stone and time. A village, tiny, worn, alive. No one rushes, no one shouts. There's laundry hanging between crooked beams. Goats muttering to themselves beside crumbling walls. An old man sweeping the same patch of dirt he's swept every morning for 50 years. You smile. They don't look at you like a stranger. They nod, like they've seen travelers from the dark before. Like this village has always sat at the edge of the underworld. And maybe it has. You find a seat near the well in the center of the square. The stone rim is warm, smooth from decades of elbows and gossip. A child nearby draws spirals in the dust with a stick. You watch and think, this is it. Not the climax, not the revelation. Just life, returning gently again. Here's your historical fix, because we promised you one in every chapter. Ancient villages throughout the Mediterranean often had threshold festivals, celebrations not tied to gods, but to returning, to the safe passage of those who'd been gone in body or spirit. They'd light torches, lay fresh linens, sing songs about hands returning to bread making, to weaving, to resting. Historians still debate whether these festivals were originally religious or purely social, but most agree they mattered because they reminded everyone that crossing back into life is just as sacred as surviving the dark. You glance up. The sun is lowering now, not setting, just slanting sideways in that way late afternoons do. You exhale. Your breath doesn't catch this time. It lands. You realize this whole time you've been carrying something. Not just the seed, but her, Persephone. Not as a goddess in robes, but as a rhythm, a way of being, to go down and rise, to rest and return without apology. You reach into your pocket one last time, not for the seed, for your hand, just to feel it there, to remember. You close your fingers around it and whisper not to the wind, not to a god, but to yourself, I'm still here. And the seed answers, not with sound, but with certainty. Evening comes slowly, not the way it does in cities, all at once with light switches and shut windows and the low hum of distant traffic. Here, dusk is a negotiation, a soft agreement between the sun and the earth. You're sitting on the edge of the village now, where the stone path gives way to wild grass again. The sky has gone lavender. The air cools just enough to lift the hair on your arms. It feels like something is closing, not ending, not vanishing, just folding itself gently like a letter you've finished reading but aren't ready to throw away. You lie back, again, because the sky deserves your full attention. The stars are returning, one by one. No rush, no drama. Just there, above you, like they never left. You think of Persephone, not the goddess, the girl, the one who knelt beside you in the dark, who didn't promise you anything, but gave you space to breathe, who didn't drag you toward the light, but stayed beside you until you remembered how to move. That's how healing happens, isn't it? Not in bright flashes or sudden music, but in moments like this, where you feel the weight in your chest shift slightly, where you realize the world isn't pressing down on you anymore. It's holding you, and maybe it always was. Here's your final history moment, because even sleep deserves closure. There's a lesser-known myth that Persephone didn't just split her time between two worlds. She chose to return to the underworld, not out of obligation, not out of punishment, but out of love. Because once you've learned to sit with sorrow, once you've walked with the broken and held space for the half-healed, you don't fear the dark. You honor it. Historians still argue whether this version was ever officially recorded or if it emerged later as reinterpretation. But it endures. Because something in us knows the most powerful people aren't those who never break. They're the ones who break and stay kind anyway. The ones who descend and still return with light in their hands. You close your eyes, not because you're tired, because you're ready. There's no music, no voice calling your name, just breath, in, out, like a tide. You feel the earth beneath you, solid, soft, ancient, and you know, whatever waits tomorrow, you will meet it. Not alone, not pretending to be untouched, but rooted, remembering. You are the seed, and the soil, and the hand that plants. And tonight you rest. So now everything slows. The story ends. But the silence stays with you long and quiet, like a soft hallway after the lights have gone out. Your thoughts drift like the smoke of that low burning fire. Nothing urgent now. Nothing sharp. Just images fading gently. Bread warm from the coals. Spirals in the dirt. The hush of a goddess sitting close but saying nothing. You did not fix the world. You didn't need to. You sat with it. And that's more powerful than most people ever realize. Let your breath settle now. Let your jaw loosen. Your shoulders soften. You're not late. You're not wrong. You're not broken. You are in between. And that's where the magic lives. Persephone knew it. So do you. You'll wake up again tomorrow, maybe to emails, maybe to dishes, maybe to grief that didn't ask for permission to come back. But now you sleep, wrapped in myth, anchored in earth, seen by someone who sat beside you when the world got too heavy to carry alone. You're allowed to be unfinished. You're allowed to begin again. So go ahead, let go. The dark is not here to swallow you. It's here to hold you just long enough to help you rise.